He stood there in silence as they knelt in front of him, three women on cold earth, hands trembling, voices breaking, and in that moment something inside him tightened, not with anger, but with a heavy, quiet sadness he had learned to carry for years, because this land by the river was the last thing they had, and everyone knew it, and he knew it too, yet he said nothing, his face calm, his eyes distant, like a man who had already been judged before he ever spoke. The house behind them was small and old, wood darkened by rain and time, built by hands that were now gone, standing there as if it was holding its breath, while the river flowed past like it always had, patient and indifferent. He remembered how his father once said that land remembers people, that nature listens even when humans refuse to, but that felt like a weak comfort now, because the man in the suit had power, real power, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. The order was clear, the machines were ready, and the papers had already been signed somewhere far away, in offices where this house was just a number on a map. The women begged quietly, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to be heard, because humiliation had already taken its toll, and pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. He watched them, the grandmother whose knees ached but still touched the ground, the mother whose hands shook as she tried to sound strong, the daughter whose eyes were red from nights without sleep, and he felt something press against his chest, something old, something he had learned to bury under discipline and obedience. He had grown up believing rules were rules, that progress required sacrifice, that people like him were necessary, but standing there, with the excavator waiting like a patient beast, he felt the weight of injustice settle in his bones. Still, he said nothing, because powerful men were not supposed to hesitate, and because hesitation was dangerous in his world. The river wind moved through the trees, soft and steady, and for a brief moment, almost unnoticed, the clouds above shifted, slow and heavy, as if the sky itself was listening. The women's voices grew weaker, not because they had given up, but because hope had learned to speak quietly around men like him. He turned his head slightly, just enough to signal the driver, and the machine's engine came alive with a low growl, drowning out the sound of the river, and in that sound was the helplessness of people who had already lost, because when power decides, patience is all that remains. The grandmother closed her eyes, the mother swallowed her fear, the daughter held her breath, and somewhere deep beneath the soil, unseen and unfelt, water began to move in ways no contract could control. The machine moved closer, slow and deliberate, metal tracks pressing into the soft ground, and with every step the riverbank seemed to sigh under the weight, while he stood there with his hands at his sides, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward, because turning back now would mean admitting doubt, and doubt was something men like him were taught to kill early. The excavator arm lifted, paused in the air like it was thinking, then lowered toward the earth near the house, and the first bite of metal into soil felt louder than it should have, like a crack in something fragile. The women flinched, not screaming, not crying anymore, just shrinking inward, because this was the sound of the end. He felt it too, a dull ache behind his ribs, a quiet shame he refused to name, reminding him of his own childhood home that had been lost to a factory expansion years ago, taken legally, efficiently, without mercy. He had told himself then that this was how the world worked, that progress did not stop for tears, that someone always had to lose, and today it was simply their turn. The river kept flowing, but its surface began to change, small ripples growing restless, the water darker near the shore, as if something unseen was stirring below. The driver dug again, deeper this time, pulling wet soil onto the bank, and the smell of damp earth filled the air, thick and heavy, clinging to memory. The mother whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe just a name, and the daughter squeezed her eyes shut, imagining the walls collapsing, the rooms disappearing, the stories erased forever. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable now, because the ground under his polished shoes felt softer than before, slightly unstable, though he told himself it was nothing, just nerves, just imagination. The excavator arm swung again, and as it did, a low cracking sound came from the riverbank, faint at first, like wood bending under pressure. No one reacted immediately, because hope had been exhausted, and fear had learned to be quiet. Then the sound came again, deeper this time, and the river's edge slumped inward by a few inches, water seeping into the freshly dug trench. The driver hesitated, glancing back, waiting for instruction, and in that pause, something changed. He looked down, really looked down, and saw water bubbling where there should have been none, felt the ground subtly shift beneath him, slow but undeniable. The sky darkened just a shade, clouds thickening, wind picking up, rustling the trees like whispered warnings. The grandmother opened her eyes, confused, then alert, as if she recognized this feeling, this moment when nature stops being passive. The river rose slightly, not dramatically, not yet, but enough to notice, enough to make the driver cut the engine. Silence fell, broken only by water lapping closer than before. He felt a strange pull in his chest, not fear exactly, but the unsettling sense that something far bigger than authority was waking up, and for the first time that day, he didn't know what would happen next. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected, thick and uncomfortable, and in that stillness the river made itself heard again, louder now, closer, as if it was slowly reclaiming its voice after being ignored for too long. The driver wiped sweat from his forehead, eyes fixed on the water creeping into the trench, and the machine sat frozen, suddenly small and useless against something it could not fight. He felt his confidence drain in quiet drops, replaced by a strange patience he had never practiced before, the kind that forces you to wait and watch instead of command. The women did not move, but their breathing changed, no longer sharp with panic, softer now, cautious, like people who sense a shift but are afraid to believe in it. The riverbank cracked again, this time clearly visible, a long dark line spreading through the soil, and the house gave a faint groan, not of collapse, but of warning, as if it was speaking for the land beneath it. He took a step back without realizing it, his polished shoes sinking slightly, mud clinging to leather, and that small indignity hit him harder than any accusation ever had. This place was no longer obeying him. Rain began as a whisper, light drops touching skin and dust, barely noticeable, but steady, patient, as if it had all the time in the world. The grandmother slowly stood, pain in her joints forgotten, eyes fixed on the river, and for the first time that day she did not look afraid. The mother followed, helping the daughter up, their hands still clasped, not in desperation now, but in quiet resolve. He watched the water rise inch by inch, spreading across the ground he had ordered disturbed, swallowing the trench, softening the earth until it could no longer hold the weight of machines or certainty. The driver shook his head and spoke softly, almost apologetically, saying the ground was unstable, that it was too risky to continue, that the river was undermining everything. He wanted to argue, to assert control, to remind everyone who made the decisions, but the words would not come, because standing there, soaked by light rain, surrounded by shifting land and rising water, he felt small in a way no courtroom or boardroom had ever made him feel. The clouds thickened, the rain grew firmer, and the river, calm but relentless, pushed closer to the house, not to destroy it, but to protect what was rooted there, and in that moment of forced waiting, something inside him finally slowed down enough to listen. The rain settled into a steady rhythm, not violent, not dramatic, just constant, and that constancy did what shouting never could, it wore down certainty. The river spilled gently over its edge now, spreading across the ground like a calm claim, and the excavator's tracks sank deeper with every second, metal groaning as if embarrassed by its own weight. He stood there soaked, tie darkened, hair plastered to his forehead, and for the first time in his career he felt the sharp sting of helplessness, the same one he had caused so many others without ever noticing. The driver refused to restart the engine, not out of rebellion, but out of simple truth, saying the machine would tip, that the bank could collapse completely, that someone could die, and those words landed heavier than any legal argument. He looked at the house again, really looked at it, the crooked shutters, the worn wood, the way it leaned slightly toward the river like it trusted it, and suddenly he saw more than a structure. He saw time, memory, patience, the kind of quiet strength that does not beg to exist. The women stood beside him now, no longer below, no longer pleading, just waiting, and in their silence there was dignity, the kind that survives injustice. The rain slowed, then stopped, as if its point had been made, and the river held its new line, firm and unmoving. Phones rang, messages came in, engineers warned of environmental risk, of liability, of permits that would now take years, and the power he had arrived with slipped away piece by piece, not stolen, just rendered useless. He nodded once, slowly, and told the crew to pull back, his voice low, steady, stripped of arrogance, and as the machine retreated, struggling free from the mud, something inside him finally broke open, not in anger, but in understanding. He turned to the women, searching for words that could fix what he had helped break, but found none, and in that silence was his real punishment. They did not celebrate, they did not thank him, They simply watched as he walked away, smaller than when he arrived, while behind them the house stood, damp but alive, held by earth and water and time. The river flowed on, calm again, carrying no pride, no cruelty, only balance, and for the first time in a long while, justice did not shout, it simply remained.